In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to apply motion blur within Premiere Pro. So it'll turn something like this into something like this. And now the difference is subtle. If I navigate and bring the fast lettering in, you'll notice that it's super crisp on each frame. But for this edit, when the filter's applied, there's some motion blur. So this is kind of replicating what you see in cinema when film actually captures motion between the action between each individual frame. So we're going to apply this onto text first. You can apply this onto images and video as well, but we'll do text first. So I have a text layer here and we're going to apply this effect. Go to your Effects tab, and if this isn't available, go up to Window and choose Effects. In the search bar, type in Transform, and you'll see Transform here. It's with under the Video Effects, Distort, Transform. Click and drag to place that onto your clip. And we're going to edit this effect by going to the Effect Controls tab. If you don't have this, click up on Window and choose Effect Controls. So the first thing we're going to do is change the position of this fast text. And the way to do that is you can see here, as I slide this blue playhead, you'll notice it also changes the blue playhead down here in my timeline. So this shows you the kind of duration of your clip. And when we make any changes in here in this field, it's going to be applied on the bottom here. Okay, so we're going to change the position of our text. And usually I'll take this over to the left side and we'll have the fast text come sliding in. So the first step is we need to have some movement added to our text. And the way to do that is in the position. And you'll see that you have these two blue numbers here. The first one, if I slide up and down, will change the horizontal position. And the next one will change the vertical position. So you can drag these by clicking and holding. Or you can actually click on them and type in a number amount and hit return. Now the position modifier you'll also notice is down in the motion tab. And this is usually where you'll edit the position of a clip within Premiere. But for this effect, you need to be changing the position underneath your transform effect, not under the motion tab. So I'll make sure to close that. So make sure when you're following along that you're always within transform, and that's where you're changing the position. Okay, so first off, let's put in some keyframes. So I'm going to drag my blue playhead over here. And to do a keyframe, you want to hit this little stopwatch in the position tab. And we have a keyframe here. Drag your blue playhead over just a little bit more, and we're going to add another one. But if I click this stopwatch here, it will delete all of the keyframes, which we don't want to do. So after you've done your first one from hitting the stopwatch, now to add a keyframe, you hit this Add Remove Keyframe button. And we'll add a second one here. You can add multiple keyframes if you want to, once you get used to the animating. And to delete them, you can click once on the keyframe, it will turn blue, and you can hit delete. Or you can actually click and drag to highlight multiple keyframes. The selected ones will turn blue and you can delete those. Okay, so we want to edit these keyframes. The first one is where we'll have the text off to the side. So to edit this keyframe, you need to make sure that you actually have it selected. When you slide the blue playhead, you'll notice that the keyframe Add Remove button here turns blue when I slide over it. If you try and edit a keyframe and it's not blue over here, that means you're in a new space and it will actually add in a new keyframe as soon as you start to make a change, which we don't want. To change this keyframe, let's use our arrows. Your arrows are really helpful to navigate between keyframes, and they'll go to the previous and next keyframe. So let's go to our first one. You'll see that it's blue, which means our playhead is directly over a keyframe and we're editing it. So I'm going to change this slider here and bring my text all the way down so that it goes off to the left there. So now it's -413. And the way keyframes work is this keyframe here is a key moment in time that has these two parameters locked. If I go over to this keyframe, there's a key moment in time where these two parameters are locked. And as I slide my blue playhead, watch this first number here. You'll see it gets lower, and that shows that the lower the number, the further over to the left horizontally the text is. So what we've done is we've locked a moment in time with these parameters. We've locked one here, and then Premiere ends up calculating and animating the difference between them in the time. So now if I push play, you'll see our text slides in. And now that takes a little bit too much time for what I'm looking for. It's a little bit too slow. So the way to do that is you want to change the time between these two, and that's as easy as clicking on one and dragging it to the left. Now the time span is much shorter. Let's play that again. That's a bit better. I'd still like it a bit quicker. That looks pretty good. So if you need to change the time between your keyframes, don't worry about putting in another one and deleting the one in the middle. Just click and drag to change the position and the timing. Okay, so we have our text animated. And now the next thing to do is to add the motion blur. If you come down here, you'll see that there's Use Composite Shutter. I'll slide this out. Shutter Angle. We're going to untick that. And Shutter Angle here. You can drop this down. Let's slide this up and let's make this about 180. And if you need something specific number-wise, you can click and type in 180. And what this is doing is actually kind of changing the shutter speed almost like a camera would. And now if I bring this back and hit play, we have some motion blur. So if I use my arrow keys to navigate through this, you'll see that there's some blur there. Now what I'll do is I'll take the shutter angle down, and you can see that it actually lessens the blur, or makes it a lot higher. Maximum is about 360 there. So this is going to be something particular. Let's say we do 123. Push play. That's pretty good. Let's take it up to 230. I like that. 270. I think I'll stick at 270. People usually recommend 180, but this is where you can experiment, and depending on what element you're animating and applying the blur to, it could have a different effect. Okay, so let's play that again. I still think my text could come in quicker. So what we're going to do is shorten the distance between the keyframes. And as I do this, it should be quicker. That's a bit better. Let's do it even quicker. About there. Okay, that looks good. Now, what I'm going to do is, because my text is moving a lot faster now, you'll see these kind of replications of the text. So to change that, just change your shutter angle here until they get nice and blurry. You can't see the lines as much there. That looks good. So it's about changing the timing, changing your shutter angle, and going back and forth and replaying it until you find something that you like. Sometimes your keyframes are in place, but they're in the middle of your clip. So if I move my playhead to the first keyframe, you'll see that there's this section in my clip that doesn't have anything in it. And so I'd like to remove that section of the clip. And the first thing you can do is you can actually move your keyframes. So click and drag to highlight your keyframes. Click and first hold on the first keyframe and drag it to the left. Make sure you're dragged all the way to the left here. Sometimes when you zoom in, you might not be all the way to the left. So make sure that's all the way to the left, and I make sure my keyframes are all the way to the left side. And that means at the beginning of my clip now, we're at the beginning, my first keyframe will begin and my second one will follow. I'll undo those steps and I'll show you another way to do that. Another way is to actually trim off the beginning of this clip. Move your blue playhead to the first keyframe, and I'm going to use my keyframe buttons here to make sure I'm right on it. And you'll see that we have this space of clip here. Using your arrow tool, move your mouse to the beginning of the clip till you get the red arrow bracket and drag to the right and release. And you'll see here we've removed this part of the front clip, and now our keyframes are at the beginning. So once you've put your keyframes in, you can also rearrange them. And if I had multiple keyframes, you can drag and highlight to select all of them. And this means your distance between these keyframes and the speed and pacing is locked and safe. And you can move the whole group as a family to a different spot within your clip. Okay, so I've got some other examples here. So I have my photo here, and you see that I have my two keyframes. And this keyframe begins with the photo in the middle of the page, and it starts to move off to the side like that. So it's a little slide away transition. And when I play this, it moves away fine, but when I go frame by frame, you'll see that the movement doesn't feel very nice to watch. So if I go down, I've already applied my transform effect. Make sure use composition shutter angle is off. And let's change this to 180. And now when I push play, the photo moves away with this blur. I'll take it up to where it starts. You can see the blur here. If I take the blur down, not as much. Let's give it about 180. So you can apply this effect to photos and images. Another way to apply this effect is by doing a zoom effect. If I push play here on the space image, you see the space image zooms out, And when I take it back to the individual moments in time between these two keyframes, you can see that there's this motion blur here. If I turn this off, the stars are super crisp and it doesn't look very good. Put it back up, and I've got this one set at 300. I did some experimenting and found out that 300 was the best, in my opinion, on this zoom out. And now you'll notice that I don't have any keyframes in my position tab because the position of the image is the same. What I've changed is my scale tab. And so in the same way that I added positioning, I added in some keyframes by hitting the stopwatch and adding in some keyframes. And say I take it to the first keyframe here, you'll notice that my scale is 300, which stands for 300%. And my next one is 100%. So from this moment in time, the image is 300%, and Premiere fills in the space in between to arrive at 100% there like that. So if I added in another keyframe, let's add in one here, and let's make this 40%. And now you'll notice that my image is smaller. So when I go between these two, so when I slide it down here, from 100 down to 40, it also shrinks the image. So you can use this transform effect to change the position and have something move left or right or up or down, but you can also change the scale. If I wanted to, I could also add in some keyframes for positioning as well. So you have that option to add in multiple keyframes for different settings. I'll undo that. And another way to add this effect is onto some actual footage. Now what I have here is I have a shot of a drone with a GoPro, and I have the shot zooming out and going stationary. Just like a quick zoom. And this zoom is not actually in the original footage. This is me using the scale within the transform effect, and I've applied 2 keyframes. And I wanted this effect to begin right at the beginning, so I slid this keyframe all the way back to the beginning like that. So here it is normally, and here it is with the effect. So this first one, you can see that I don't have any shutter angle on there. And that's why when we're zooming in, there's no motion blur. But if I go to this second one with the effect, you'll notice I have 360 for the shutter, and you can see that there's a lot of motion blur. It's super quick, but it gives it just a natural and more pleasing to the eye look. So that's how you quickly and easily apply some motion blur within Premiere Pro. Experiment with it, change your keyframes and change your shutter angle amount, and see what kind of results you get.